Welcome to Dylan Experience Podcast. I'm your host, Dylan Sessler. Today is episode 14. I hope I didn't check that, where I have an incredible guest lined up for you. But before we get to our guest, don't forget to purchase your copy of Defy the Darkness on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and don't forget to join my inspirational text platform. Go ahead and just text HI to 1-608-336-4480. My next guest I'm excited for this, is a 38-year-old retired veteran from the Wisconsin National Guard. He's got two combat tours, 20 years in. He spent 8 years as an instructor at Fort McCoy, teaching instructor courses as well as OCS, Officer Candidate School for those who aren't military. He also has 7 years of service as a corrections officer and sergeant. My guest has built his own coaching practice around helping veterans come home, which is awesome. I love that. He's got a group coaching service he calls the Fire Team, along with one-on-one coaching. My next guest is Loison Kast. Loison, how you doing today?
I am fantastic, and I'm excited to be here.
It's gonna be fun, man. I'm trying to get more and more veterans, not only to see my content, but also to connect with me and the people that I'm connecting with. And like right now, I'm starting to connect with more and more creators, coaches, veterans that are stepping out and doing something about all of the struggles that veterans have. And I love what you're doing. Why don't you tell me anything you want to tell me. Tell me your story. Tell me what you do. Tell me why you're doing it. Tell me everything.
Oh man, that's a lot.
Yeah.
It took me a little while actually to figure out what it was I wanted to do with this, because when my transformation happened, it was at a time in my life where I was still working for the Department of Corrections, and I went through Dave Ramsey's Financial Coach Master Training. That's where my coaching profession or my coaching career actually started, but I had no idea where I wanted to go with it. And I built this little box like in my mind that said, okay, I can't help people unless they want help with their money. But I wasn't getting coached yet either at that point. Like I had not made the investment in committing to just figuring out how I could be better.
Right.
And so looking back on it, I realized that I'd managed to work myself into a place or paint myself into a corner where any given set of circumstances, I was responding with one of two options. I was either a victim because I had somebody over my head with more authority more authority than I had, telling me to do something that I didn't think was right, thought there was a better way for, or didn't believe in. And through military conditioning, if nothing else, so that, well, you just got to swallow it. Like no matter how bad it tastes, no matter how much you want to spit it out, you got to chew it and chew it and chew it until it's digestible. So felt like a victim. Now this translated into, if I did have authority over somebody and they weren't performing to my expectations, there's so much wrong with what I'm saying right now, but they weren't performing to my expectations, my response was anger.
Mm-hmm.
And as my coaching progressed, as I started working with my coach, I started to see that this was layer after layer after layer after layer of habitual thinking.
Right.
And the reason that I responded with anger, and those were literally my only two options, was because I wasn't angry. I was scared to death. And that was just my learned response to it. And I found out that if I raged hard enough, one of two things would happen. I would either gain compliance or people would just like move away from me so they didn't have to deal.
Right.
And it worked. Kinda.
Yeah.
And so I resonate with people that are in that space. And the idea of coming home, it still just punches me in the chest, because I realized that I came back home in 2008, I think. And my life kind of fell apart at that point. You know, I went to the VA just essentially to get myself checked on or checked out. I didn't feel crazy. I didn't feel like I had all this stuff going on, but I wanted to make sure. And the first psychologist I spoke with at the VA, it was an awful experience. And I kept trying to go back. Go ahead.
May I ask why?
I may have misjudged the situation, but as memory serves, he hit on me. Like, I'm literally sitting in his office and he hit on me, and I sort of froze, and then I sat through it because I felt like I had to sit through it, because remember, this is all conditioning.
Right.
Like, I didn't know that I could just get up and walk out at that point.
Yeah.
And I never really went back. And after that, I started trying to self-medicate. I was still with my ex-wife at the time, and I destroyed our finances because I worked in a bar as a bouncer. And when I wasn't working, I was just plugging 20s into the nickel machines, I was drinking heavily. I was not quite blind drunk, but definitely shouldn't have been operating a vehicle, although I probably did on a fair number of occasions. I was experimenting with recreational drugs. I remember at one point, my ex-wife had to take my 40 cal out of my hand to keep me from using it. And I don't know why I let her. I couldn't tell you. Something saved me there, but that's probably about as low as I think I've ever gone. We were legally separated, I think, at that point. And I remember living in a house because I couldn't afford to move out on my own, and having her bring at least 2 different dudes home a week and having to listen to that pretty much night after night. And I finally left. I don't know what made me leave, but it was basically the clothes on my back and my motorcycle and a couple of tools. I probably left behind several $1,000s worth of property that we jointly own, but I wanted to get out of the situation more than I wanted to take my dignity with me.
Yeah.
So made it through that, got into the Department of Corrections. I went to school to be a cop, but I had a DUI in 05. And if I'm going to be 100% honest here, at the time, I thought it was because of that, but it wasn't. It was because I wasn't performing as well as I could on the fitness exams and the interviews. And so I ended up interviewing for the Department of Corrections because bills don't pay themselves, and was really excited when they jumped at the opportunity to hire me. At least that's how it felt.
Yeah.
Once I've been working for the DOC for a couple of years, I realized they needed somebody with a pulse to put in that uniform. But
right.
At the time, it felt pretty good. So I've even with that cloudiness, I'm going to call it, like I didn't have clarity of any kind then, because remember, I'm living either as a victim or as an angry asshole. Like those are literally my 2 options.
Right.
Started the academy, met some people who were just like me. One of them actually is my best friend. I'm just starting to outgrow him, unfortunately, and that's a whole nother story. But started work once I completed the academy at, allegedly anyway, the toughest prison in the state of Wisconsin. It was Waupun Correctional Institution. I ended up working as a SEG officer right away. So it's like the prison equivalent of the infantry, the light infantry.
Yeah.
And I had fun because I was engaged, I was active, I was learning. Unfortunately, the vast majority of the people that had been working there for a while didn't quite treat these people like people. And I'm afraid I fell into that habit initially when I was learning, because I figured they knew better than I did. As I started to gain some traction, I started to see that the way they were getting treated wasn't necessarily the way I would treat them if I didn't feel like I were obliged to do that. And then I realized somehow that I didn't have to treat them that way just because other people did. So that was actually a kind of a highlight And so I just went to work in a different way, and I took the ribbing, you know, thug hugger and shit like that, my coworkers would say, and I didn't really, it didn't really affect me like it had or it would have before. But then I started to actually get good at it, and I started exploring other things like, well, okay, what are my other opportunities within this? And I think there was part of my natural creativity that was essentially pushing to get out, and I couldn't let it. And so I don't know that I was aware of it. Like looking back, I can see, but in the moment, I don't know if I was aware of the fact that that was part of what was causing a lot of my struggle and the mind drama that I had going on. And still, I'm still on the mindset, you know, I'm either a victim or I'm an angry asshole. I had no other options. So I changed institutions a couple of different times to see if maybe a change of environment, because, you know, changing the circumstances makes all the difference. I said with heavy sarcasm.
Right.
Got nothing to do with it, but I didn't know that at the time. So I started moving around a little bit, kind of found a little bit of a niche at Dodge Correctional, stayed there for a little while, but the face of corrections is changing and I wasn't prepared for it. And yeah, the years I spent at DCI, I think I was there for 3 years. I don't look back on them fondly, maybe because I'm in such close proximity to the time when I started to transform. So I'm still maybe a little bit ashamed of the way I behaved. But I also know that I was literally doing the best I could from one moment to the next, given what looked real to me.
Right.
And now I'm at a place where I understand that I'm home. I'm here now. I'm in the moment. I get to create from this place of there isn't really a yesterday and there isn't really a tomorrow unless I start thinking about it.
Yeah.
And if I stay engaged with creating, I don't have a bad day. I mean, circumstances are going to be what they are. They're pretty much neutral. They don't have a charge unless I give them one. I can't have a feeling about something unless I have a thought about it. And I don't know how good a job I did of telling you who I am, but
That's right.
Seems like a logical place to stop. It feels like a good.
Well, good, because I got questions.
Oh shit.
So, number one, where'd you deploy and when? If you don't mind me asking.
Oh yeah, I guess I didn't go back far enough. The first one was in 02, 02, 03, 03. I went to Kuwait as a vertical engineer. I don't remember the alphanumeric. I don't remember the MOS for it. Was 51 Bravo. Now I think it's 21 Whiskey. But went over there for about a year. I spent like 4 months or 5 months, some ridiculous amount of time up at Fort McCoy, getting ready to deploy. And then we went to Kuwait for a few months, and I built things like loading docks in the desert for semis. No idea why. I learned to drive literally every piece of equipment the Army has and get licensed on it. Of course, the licensure lapsed, but I came home with this feeling that I didn't become a soldier to do that. So I reclassed the infantry, stayed with my folks for a little while, did a semester or two of police science, I think, over at Southwestern Wisconsin Technical College in Fenimore, and then I moved to the Appleton area when I met my ex-wife. And then I deployed to Iraq in 2007 with E Troop of the 105th Cav, and we ran combat logistics patrols. And I think that might have been where I started swirling, because I didn't see a whole lot of actual action, like what most people would describe as, oh, that's all veterans go through that, you know, bloody body parts and people dying in your arms and getting into firefights. I didn't see any of that, but there was a part of me that felt like I should have.
Yeah.
There's this underlying sense, given the work that I've done, there's this underlying sense that up until, 6 months ago, I was never enough. Like I always had to do more. Like everything always had to mean more. Like I had to be special or
Right.
more special as I compared myself to other people. I
Right.
know that took a hard right turn, but it felt like the thing to say.
No, I mean it's such a I think it's such a common thing in the infantry in general, but I think more than just the infantry. Just I think there's a lot of soldiers and veterans out there that if they don't go through combat, especially infantry, that's why I think it's such a topic for infantry, is that if we don't see combat, what did we do? What did we offer? That's our job. Like we're supposed to be in the shit, giving it to the enemy so that the enemy can't give it to others, and it's such a I think it's such a silent point for most leadership and most like discussions around combat and war is that we talk about PTSD and the fact that you go to war, you see combat, you see death, you see bodies, you kill someone, and that's such a major point for discussion. But at the same time, what about the guys who are guilty for not doing enough? And I don't, I don't know if it's PTSD, but it's certainly a transition point that is not discussed, that's not offered support for. I've never seen anybody talk about like survivor's guilt, of soldiers that weren't necessarily in combat but lost friends, um, saw other units lose soldiers. This idea that as your job as infantry, if you don't do it to the combat level, you feel irrelevant. You feel like you're not worthy. I certainly think that there's a lot of guilt, there's a lot of shame, there's a lot of regret. That's can be illogical and irrational, but at the same time, if it's there, it's fucking valid. And if more people talk about it, it's certainly valid, because if everybody feels it, there's something that we need to talk about. So no, I think it's a great segue to talk about and really understand, because who is talking about that?
Yeah.
You know?
That leads us into a great opportunity to share part of my story with you, and it's worth exploring. So I told you I didn't do much of anything. I remember a controlled detonation on the road. Felt it in my chest. It was a big bomb. I remember that. But one of the things that I I created, right? And this is a little hard for me because it brings up this idea of violation of integrity and stolen valor. But I'm going to go ahead and tell the story because there's at least one more guy out there dealing with some shit like this, and it's right in line with what we're talking about anyway. So I came home, and it wasn't too long, maybe a year or two after, before people were asking me about my combat experience. And I was telling them about an incident where we got involved in a complex attack. There was an IED initially that went off right next to my truck. Fortunately, it was pointed the other way, and so it didn't do a whole lot of damage. And then I tell people that I vividly remember, or told people that I vividly remembered seeing the vapor trail of an RPG going between my truck and the truck in front of me. And then there was small arms fire, and we, handled the situation and got rolling again after we did a damage assessment. And I told that story for years, Dylan, years. And then suddenly, it wasn't too long, maybe I was 2 or 3 sessions in with my coach, I started to question the validity of it. And it was the scariest place I think I ever had to go, because I was raised to prize integrity. Like, we didn't have shit growing up in terms of money or status or possessions or anything like that. So all I had was my word. And we didn't have TV either. So I read a lot of Louis L'Amour, and that just sort of shored up the entire idea. And then I get into the army, and they're pounding the same thing. So integrity was huge. Might have been the only thing I lived for at some point. And just to be faced with questioning that kind of rocked me. But then I went back. I'm like, okay, I remember some of the guys that I used to ride with. So I started asking them about it. And here's the interesting part. They said, no, man, I don't remember that. Are you sure you were with us? Maybe you were on another clip. Maybe you were with a different platoon that day, because they would, move people around periodically and just to shake things up. But it just felt like a lie, and it felt awful. But when I realized why I had convinced myself, it made a lot more sense. That service had to mean something. It had to mean something more. So the fact that first of all, I wasn't conscripted or drafted. I enlisted in 2001. I was in reception for basic training when the towers came down. I'm already, by virtue of my service alone, representative of less than, 0.6% or something of the entire population of the US, but that wasn't enough. And I was in the Guard, and I was an engineer, and that wasn't enough, so I had to join the infantry. And then I deployed, and I went overseas, and I was actually in a combat zone. Like, it was, I got all kinds of ribbons and shit on my dress blues that say I was in a war zone. But in my mind, it wasn't enough. My war was not catastrophic enough for me.
Yeah.
And against everything, all of my integrity, I created this lie. And I can, apparently I can tell a lie really convincingly, because it wasn't a lie until I realized it was a lie.
Yep.
So I guess I have to wonder how many other guys are out there, and that's their war story. I got a chance to work with a guy recently. I'm not going to mention his name for confidentiality, but after our coaching program was over, he told me that I was literally the only thing that, like, I was his last ditch effort. His dad had committed suicide a couple of years back, and he'd seriously considered it. I didn't know that. That never came out in our coaching. But I think that's the beauty of coaching, is I'll acknowledge the past, because it's what helps the present make sense. But apart from that, I don't give a shit about it, because it's today and forward. Life only moves one way.
Yeah.
Forward.
That's a really important concept as a coach, is that if you walk into a coaching session and you judge anything, I think you're making a mistake. It's not, I'm in a different kind of niche than you. I work with trauma survivors, and I mostly have women come to me. But one of the things that I walk into in my first session is, I don't give a shit if you lie or tell me the truth. I'm not here to judge. I'm not the judge of the truth here. I'm here to validate your feelings and help you understand where you're going. If you lie to me, that's for you, right? You at some point will start to understand that lie is going to break you down. It's not going to affect me. I'm not here trying to determine whether your trauma is this big or this big. That's not what I'm here for. What I'm here for is to understand you. And at some point, usually if you tell me a lie, I'll know. And I'm not going to judge you for it. I'm going to understand part of the reason why you probably told me that is because at some point you needed to.
Yep.
You needed to use that tactic to survive your life. And far too often that goes all the way back to childhood, right? That's not just war. It's not just domestic violence. So often I find that parents have taught kids to be, by sheer strictness, or superior domination. Kids have to lie to work around their parents and live within that environment. And it just becomes second nature to be that person to their parents, and who am I to judge that? I have no right to judge that person, especially based on my choices. I lied for 19 years, right? Like I was every single day of my life for 19 years, I thought about suicide because my dad committed suicide. How can I judge a person for lying when I did it myself, right? You want to talk about actors? I was one of them, right? I could have won an Emmy Award because when I told my friends and my family, they were like, we had no fucking clue.
Yeah.
No clue. And I think it's a really profound understanding for you to see that, like, that you don't give a shit, right? Because that's so powerful as a coach when you walk in and you meet someone that's like, I don't give a shit, right? You're going to do you, I'm going to do me. And this is your space to own. And it disarms people so much that they're like, let's do this, you know, because it might be the first time in their life that they actually can. So I think that's pretty cool.
It's huge, and it's the truth, and that's the cool part of it. Like, are you familiar at all with Byron Katie?
No.
Okay. So she had an enlightenment experience. I want to say it was back in the late 80s or early 90s. And she came back with something that she created called the work. And the essence of it is judge your neighbor, write it down, ask 4 questions, and turn it around. I don't remember all 4 questions, but literally the first question. So you're making a judgment about another person. And the essence of the work is that she helps you see that judgments are projections. Fundamentally. So the first question, literally the first question she asks is it true?
Yep.
And it's not in a judgmental way. It's, we're looking for the truth. And so I guess maybe I've kind of adopted just that overall attitude. Like, I am here to help you find the truth. I'm not here to create the truth, nor am I here to tell you what the truth should be, because that would be mine. It wouldn't be yours.
Right.
But as I listen to you tell me your story, I know in the back of my mind that it's a story.
Yep.
Whether it be a war story or a life story or the story of you, story, idea, self-perception, degree of self-awareness. There's a plethora of terms that we could use for it. But at the end of the day, it's how you see yourself and how you see your world.
Right.
And I'm interested in that. Like, I'm actually interested in it. Like, oh, that's fun. But there's also this small wheel in the back of my mind that's spinning. Like, what else is possible?
Mm-hmm.
Especially if I see the person that I'm talking to suffering from something. I'm like, okay, well, that must be what looks real to them. What else is possible? What else is possible? What could also be true? What could also be true? And generally, it's the opposite end of the spectrum from where they are. And that's what makes the work fun, is initially they're like, I don't see how that's possible. And I'm like, I know, that's what makes it awesome. Are you willing to sit with me until we get there? You're the first person in a very long time that I feel like has actually heard me. So yes.
Yeah.
Cool. Let's do it.
Yeah. It's interesting. Now I'm seeing her 4 questions, and I want to read them. Question 1, again, is it true? Question 2, can you absolutely know it's true? Question 3, how do you react? What happens when you believe that thought? Question 4, who would you be without that thought? So it's really, it's quite an interesting line of questioning. And to go back to kind of what you were talking about is people, you know, when you talk about stories, right? And knowing that people are telling you a story, the interesting thing that I find about people is that when they tell you their story specifically, they're very specific about how they tell their story. And when you start looking at that over time, you start to see how their perspective is actually transitioning. And it's one of the things that I notice, because I'm a very observant person. After my dad died, it was a moment where I was like, I shut up and I listened. Right? I didn't have a mouth at that point. I had 2 ears that were the size of Dumbos, and I'm listening to everything that's happening around me. You know, for many different reasons, but it was a focal point of my life. So I started to pay attention to people. And when you start to really pay attention to people, you start to hear patterns in their word use. You start to hear patterns in how they actually use those words, like whether it's actually the definitional use or not. And it starts to get real interesting when you start addressing the definitions and the connotations that they're placing upon words, because most people don't even understand that they're not using words correctly, and they don't understand that they're not using the right words for what they've been through, which is really remarkable.
Yeah. Yeah. My coach, my initial coach, she will probably always be the woman that I call my coach, even if we're not working together anymore. She's my first, you know, and she's done God knows how much counseling and God knows how much therapy. She's a 33 years sober addict.
Wow.
And she's so good at that. I mean, and the vast majority of our conversations are well, we'll call them sessions because that's what they were. She wasn't there to play. Within 5 minutes, usually less, but within 5 minutes, she just sniped one of the words that I used. And that ended up being the majority of the session.
Yep.
Is that what you meant?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Is it because I got this massive vocabulary. I grew up without TV. I read a gazillion, that's not a real number, I don't think, books. I still read like every day. So she knows that I'm articulate. And that's not fair because she I'm pretty sure that you used that out of context, or did you? And then that's where the conversation goes. And those were some powerful sessions.
Yep. Oh yeah, I do that all the time. I usually do that in my first sessions, like my free consultations. Like people come in and, you know, we'll start talking and they'll tell their story. And we usually end up talking about one specific thing. And it's usually a word that they used or how they used it, you know, or the body language and how they use that specific word. You know, and it usually gets to that point. And I've, you know, one of my very first clients, you know, she told me in our first paid session, she's like, out of 26 years of therapy, this was the only time anyone's ever gotten to this point, because we started to define the word love, and she had never truly understood the definition of love and how it actually impacted her and what it meant to actually give love and also receive love, because her family had always struggled with giving love and she had always given but never received. So it was, you know, it was a very toxic situation, and she never had the ability to step outside of it and really look at it from a different perspective. You know, and it's things like that a lot of people don't have the ability to do, you know, in their lifetime, with someone that's observant enough to really focus on that. Whether they don't give themselves the opportunity, or, you know, I don't know if therapists really get taught about that, because oftentimes the people that come to me are people that have been to therapy and have had a terrible experience, and they come to me and they're like, you're it, I'll never go to therapy again, like you're it, you're my last resort, kind of thing. You know, and or they find my content and they're like, you get me, and I've never even spoken to you, right? Like it's just an interesting situation to see that is not more of a focus for like the helping professions, I should say.
I think you're right. And I think, and that's not necessarily true of all of them. I don't think. There are some disciplines. I don't even want to call them disciplines. They're more concepts than anything else. Have you ever heard of the 3 principles?
No.
The work of Sydney Banks that's being brought into the contemporary world by people like Jamie Smart and Michael Neal. It's the idea that our experience comes from 3 places essentially, but they're just different versions of the same place. It's mind, thought, and consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
Mind is the idea of universal mind, that there's something slightly bigger than all of us as humans out there. Thought is not what we think it is. That's a clever chopping in terms of words. And then consciousness is just awareness. But those 3 things collectively to make up our experience. Oh crap, I'm trying to remember what brought that up now. Oh, there are some psychologists, psychiatrists, and counselors that kind of work in that, and those are people that are going to be more likely to not, how do I want to say this? I think that the vast majority of counselors and therapists work according to a prescribed template.
I agree.
And there's not a single human being out there, in my personal opinion, that a template should be applied to. Not when we're talking about this.
Right.
You know, maybe there's a standard that they're required to meet for their job. I mean, obviously, you and I are familiar with that. The Army's full of standards.
Yep.
But not when we're talking about, you know, how we describe ourselves, how we define ourselves, how we're going to motivate ourselves to change because we don't like the results that we're getting. There's nothing cookie cutter about that.
Right.
So I guess maybe that's my take on it. And I haven't been through a lot of therapy or counseling, so I don't want to dip too far into this, but my limited experience with it was exactly that. I mean, it's you see it on television from time to time. Why are we talking about my childhood? It's like our first session, doc. Why am I laying on the couch talking about my childhood? Well, there's value in talking about your childhood because, as we previously discussed, there's a lot of good information there. But I barely know this doc's name is Bill. We don't have a relationship.
Yeah.
I don't trust you enough to take me there. I don't want to go there. There's a reason that I haven't gone there in, 38 years.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm kind of the same way. I don't have a ton of experience with therapy. I've probably been twice in my life, and it was when I was a kid, and I wasn't talking anyway. So, the reality is that I speak only through the experiences of what people tell me, and I probably hear only about the bad people. But I know there's good therapists out there and good psychologists out there. I follow a lot of them on TikTok and Instagram, and but it is interesting that I get people that come to me because of therapy, and it's just it's not good, right? I'd honestly be happy if I didn't have a job because that would mean that people would be getting the right kind of help, right? I don't want to do the work that I do for the rest of my life because I'd rather solve the problem and come out of it with, you know, a mental health community and a mental health profession that knows how to do the work for all people, not just the people that, you know, have minimal problems or are able to work through their problems better, or, you know, find the right therapists. You know, like I want all people to have access to the good therapy, right? That can solve their problems. But, you know, it's the world, and I don't think that's ever going to happen.
You stated earlier that we have a little bit different niches, and I'm going to agree to disagree if that's okay. Because I think at its core, the work that you and I both do is help people understand where their experience comes from.
Certainly.
You know, it's a mind-made prison.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it's only, the entire prison is only built on one or two bricks. And you help people see that. I help people see that. And,
you just talk to veterans. I usually don't. So that's when I say niche. That's all I'm talking about. Is I usually talk to a different demographic of people.
Well, it's
very similar problems, extremely similar. When I do speak to veterans, I mean, nothing changes, right? The only thing that changes is the demographic. Like I'm usually talking to a man versus a woman, and that's it. Right? The problems are so remarkably similar that it's, you know, one of the things I talk about on TikTok is, you know, PTSD is not monopolized on the military. It's not monopolized by war. Like I have patients, you know, or I shouldn't call them patients, clients that they've been in a war zone their entire life, and they've never left America. You know, like it's, and I've worked with veterans that have been in a war zone before they ever joined the military. You know, like your home life can become a war zone, and PTSD and trauma and all of these, and how people interact with children is remarkably like bad. You know, like the parenting that I hear about is incredibly poor. It's incredibly detrimental to children. It's incredibly detrimental to, you know, the future of like being a rational and you know, like kind or self-compassionate human being. Like the environment that these people grow up in, it's no wonder why they have problems. Is that they have no support at home. They're silenced, or they're literally told that they don't have problems, even though they may have sexual trauma or like, you know, incredibly bad abuse. Like it's remarkable.
Sounds like your clients and my clients share some similar characteristics in that even though the vast majority of their cups are empty, like they're bone dry and they've been empty for a while, they still try to pour them out into other people.
Yeah, absolutely.
That never stops. They're so selfless.
Yep.
But they don't have that boundary, essentially.
Yep.
Because somehow or other they got conditioned to, that's where I'm going to find what I'm looking for, is just giving it everything I got, giving everything I have to other people, just hoping that comes back.
Yep.
You know,
and that's a learned trait. You know, certainly kindness is something that I think is, you know, nature. It's natured within us, but it's very much determined by the people that we have to interact with. And if you are put into a situation where, you know, let's say you have a narcissistic parent, you're going to become incredibly kind because you have to. Right? There's a survival need in a sense, and it's interesting to see the people that have that versus the people that don't, and seeing where, you know, if you really want to start understanding people, just start paying attention to how they talk about the people that they've been exposed to, you know, and even the people that have harmed them their entire life, these they talk kindly of them because there's a survival need to actually do so.
Yeah.
When the reality is that you're in a session with me and there's no harm, there's no you know, there's no boundaries here. Like you're absolutely safe here, but yet there's still a need to talk kindly of a person that has harmed you your entire life. And it's like, I want you to show me the teeth and get fucking angry for a second, right? Like this is something that needs to be discussed and opened up about, and understand that you've been harmed by these people, and that there's feelings in there, right? The body has this intricate system. Like memory is not just up in your head and in your brain. Memory is within your whole body, right? It's called procedural memory. And when you really step into what has been built throughout your life, habit is not just a, you know, an emotional synapse or a you know, a thought. It's a physical, emotional, energetic feeling that can come out, and it turns on your amygdala, you know, versus your neocortex. So it's remarkable to see that stuff, and it's a challenge.
Yeah, I may be fortunate. Just the awareness of the fact that my angry response was visceral, was enough to make me start to change the habit. The awareness was the first step. I swear, that's the first step in virtually any 12 step, isn't it? It's just knowing you have a problem, or words to that effect.
I would imagine so. I've never actually studied the 12 steps, so I don't know.
Okay. I want to say that's true, and I'm sure somebody will call me out on it if they hear this and I was horribly wrong, but I don't mind learning.
Let me pull it up.
Oh Lord. So you're going to call me out on it. Bless you, sir.
Step number 1, this is Alcoholics Anonymous. We admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable.
Okay.
So it's
I think I can get away with that one.
It's pretty close. Yeah. Yeah, that's That's pretty
I'll,
close.
I'll take it. I'm sorry, I think I sidetracked this. I did want to go back to the idea of niching. I don't exclusively, or I don't find myself exclusively working with veterans. And I actually support my wife's business. She's a boudoir photographer here in Fond du Lac, and she's actually built a community on Facebook. This group has over 1,000 members, and that's where the vast majority of her business comes from. And she and I actually recently sat down and had a conversation that sounded an awful lot like, I don't like the way these ladies are talking about themselves.
Yeah.
And so I decided that I was going to offer sessions to these folks if they were really struggling with something. And being a life coach, it's whatever life is throwing at you right now, whether it be interpersonal relationships or personal finance or any of the things. So I think I work the most effectively with veterans, but it doesn't necessarily, I'm not going to not give water to someone who's dying of thirst.
Yep.
If that makes any kind of sense at all.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think about it as marketing, right? Like I'm a practical person.
Right.
I can help anybody, but the
Yes.
reality is that, you know, when I stepped on TikTok, because TikTok is my platform, that's where I have like 438,000 followers now. I stepped on thinking I was going to talk to veterans, right? So I just started making content. I started making content about what helped me overcome the things that I overcame. And lo and behold, I think at the time it was mostly women on TikTok, and I started being followed by 75 to 85% females. And that grew, right? I grew, you know, exponentially in the first few months to get to 30, 50, 100,000 followers. And then within 9 months, I had 300,000 followers. And it was, you know, I transitioned from being this, you know, this potential veteran, you know, life coach or mental health coach is really what I call myself now.
Right.
To really being anything, right? Like I can talk to anybody, I can help anybody. But I don't build that message out to everybody. I just let whoever needs me find me, right? That's where I really focus my business side of things, is that I have a niche, but eventually that niche will kind of cease to matter, because everyone will, you know, my message will start to permeate where it will. And I speak to the majority of the people that I speak to, and it's women, typically women with trauma, a lot of divorced women, usually between the ages of 25 and 50. You know, it's kind of all over the place, but trauma is literally the connecting factor to everyone, right? I talk to veterans on occasion, and even for the military, because I'm still in the military. I do suicide discussions. You know, I go out and have speaking engagements with companies, and I talk about my own suicide. So I speak to everybody, you know, and the only reason I niche down to women in general, or I focus my advertising on women or anything, like it's literally just because
it found you.
Yeah, exactly. I know my customers now, and most of my customers are women, and it's no problem with that. It's going to be hard, you know, and I think I know why. It's because men are hard. Men are hard to talk to. Men are hard to reach. Men are hard to open up. I know, I was there, right? Like I didn't want to fucking talk to anybody. I didn't want to hear anybody's ideas or thoughts. Like at one point, I was the most toxic thing in my life, right? My silence was toxic. And, you know, it's not really a trait that's really discussed enough about toxic, right? Like my toxicity was the demise of all of my relationships up until my marriage. You know, it was, I wouldn't create boundaries. I wouldn't talk about like, hey, I don't like that. I wouldn't say it, right? Because that would lead into a conversation that usually went to, what's wrong with you, Dylan? And it's, how am I going to explain that without explaining I want to die, right? Like, so my silence was like, it was the thing that stopped all conversations. I kind of say, like, if you don't talk within your relationship, you're not building your relationship.
Yeah.
And that was me, like, so I know, like, men are hard, men are very difficult. And I'm sure if that comes out, which I'll probably cut, um, and put it on TikTok or something like that, that might speak to men, who knows? But like your most toxic trait for men is probably silence,
Silence.
and I wish more people would kind of talk about it and expose it, because it just doesn't have the traction. And so many men, right? Like 79% of suicides are men.
Yep.
Like, I wonder why.
Because they don't talk to anyone, because they're culturally conditioned not to talk to anyone. That is still so pervasive. It shocks me.
Yep.
But again, I'm on the other side of it. You talk about sabotaging relationships. I realized that the vast majority of mine, including my former spouse, ended up not working out, essentially because I found myself gravitating toward people who needed to heal.
Yep.
And I loved that. So that's always been a part of me. But it's like, once they were healed and once they were whole, one of two things happened. Either I got bored and found a way to sabotage it, or they suddenly saw me for who I was. They basically got on the other side of their own insecurity and started to see how insecure I was.
Yep.
And they left.
Yep.
And I can't blame them for that.
Right.
But I couldn't even begin to understand that until I started. Let me back up. Until I stopped looking outside myself for the answers to the questions I was asking and what I wanted to find.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you have to be able to see, like, I think that kind of mentality is so common, right? Like, these healing type people, what you can call them empaths, you can call them healers, you can call them whatever you want, but these people that want to heal other people are so often people that need to be healed themselves. And it becomes, the healing process for them to other people is a distraction, or it becomes a habit. It becomes something that it's the only way that they appreciate life anymore. And like, I look at it very differently from where I was, because I'm that kind of person. Like, I'm a fixer, that's just who I am. But at the same time, I see the weakness in that, right? I recognize that if that is my whole purpose, what happens when I can't help someone? I know what I do when I can't do what I want to do, right? And what happens is bad stuff,
Yeah.
right? It becomes it goes back to the toxicity, right? The silence and all of that stuff. So I don't lock in my value on a task anymore of trying to heal people. It's not my fucking job, right? The only job that I have in my life is to heal myself, is to make the best version of myself and be happy with that. I can't fix other people. I can't heal other people. I can't save other people, right? If I was a medic and I could physically take your aorta and put it back together, I could save you. But when we're talking mental health, I can't save you, because there's a cognitive environment that I will never understand, right? Like, we have somewhere between, and we don't know, somewhere between 6,000 and like 35,000 thoughts or decisions a day. And when you get to the bottom of that, I can't even understand my 6,000 to 35,000 decisions in a day. How the fuck am I supposed to understand yours? It's not my job, right? It's not my job, right? So my purpose is me. And if I have extra, I give it to you. And with that, all I am to another person is a guide. I can be a support structure. I can be a guide. But if you lean on me, eventually I'll fall too. And so I don't put myself in a position to be torn down by people that don't know how to focus on themselves. That's why I wrote my book. That's why I built my podcast. That's why I built my content, is because I don't want you to call me all the time and be like, hey, Dylan, I need your help right now. Like, that's not my job, right? I put all of this out there to say, you need to learn how to figure it out yourself. You have to, because at some point there's going to be nobody around you.
Oh man.
Right? Nobody's going to come save you.
No one's coming to save you. That's literally what was running through my mind.
Yeah. Nobody's going to be there. There's I promise you, at some point in your life, and the people listening right now, nobody is going to be there one day, and you are going to have to figure it out. You are going to have to get down on your hands and knees because you're fucking blind and find the next step. And you're going to have to crawl. And, you know, I can give you all the resources I can. I can give you my book. I can give you my podcast. I can give you my content. I can share other people's stories like Loison's. But it's up to you to take this stuff and input it into what you've been through. It's your job to rewrite your book, your story, your narrative, whatever you want to call it, and edit that fucking thing and fix yourself. Yeah. Because you've got 6 to 35,000 decisions every day for the last 35, 40, 50 years that you have to process, not me. Nobody else, not your therapist, not your mom, not your dad, not your psychologist, not your life coach, not Loison, not me. It's got to be you. We're just here to help. And that's what really taught me how to help people. Is that I teach people self-responsibility. You know, that I want you to really take control of this process. You want to heal? You've got to learn it's going to suck. And you've got to want it.
Get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Yeah.
That's it. That's life.
Yeah. That's one of the better pieces of content I put out not too long ago. I told my tiny little community that the second best day of my life was when I realized that no one was coming to save me. And the best day of my life was knowing that I didn't need them to.
Yeah.
I think that's probably a work in progress. I think we all have days where we actually start believing our shitty thoughts.
Oh yeah.
It happens to everyone, you know. But that's kind of what saves me when I get into spaces like that, is I don't have to believe what I'm thinking. Just because there's a crappy thought in my head doesn't mean I have to adopt it, take it home, feed it, put it through school. None of that shit.
Yeah.
It doesn't belong to me just because it's there. And if I can come up with a good enough reason to let it go, it will let go of me. That's more Byron Katie, by the way.
Well, I love how Jordan Peterson talks about thinking, right? Like, thinking is the concept that you create a scenario in your head and you allow it to kill itself.
Ooh.
Right? Like,
I like that.
You know, if you're going to go make macaroni and cheese and you leave the fork, like, in your mind, you leave the fork in the bowl and then you put the bowl in the microwave and you're like, boom, I just blew up my microwave. That thought just killed itself because that's a bad ending. Right? And what your thoughts are really this continuous notion of killing off a bad idea until you get to a point where you either have an idea that actually kills you or you continue. Right? Like, and it becomes pervasive when you are put into an environment that your thoughts are required to kill you, in a sense, because your environment sucks. And I really love how Jordan explains that, and I think it's genius.
I'll have to dig into that. That's a little darker than most of the stuff I run typically or study typically, but it sounds worthwhile.
I love Jordan Peterson. I think he's more, well, sometimes I think he's more real than I am. I'm a very, I wouldn't say dark realist, but I'm a very realistic person. Like,
I'd call you raw.
Yeah.
Oh, if I were to describe you in one word, I think it's effective.
Yeah.
Because I don't believe you're concerned about anything but the truth.
Yeah.
And you want people to do it as expeditiously as you want them to find it as expeditiously as possible, because I think you understand the value of time. And I think the reason that you understand the value of time is because you can look back on your life and see how much of it you spent in a place that wasn't this place.
Yeah.
Am I anywhere close to the?
You are spot on. And it's interesting because normally people don't come on my podcast and tell me who I am.
I'm sorry.
Which is no, I love it. This is a change of pace, and that's good. It's interesting to see how other people see me, because I'm always the one looking at other people and kind of telling them who they are. So it's always interesting to have another coach on, because we always kind of do this. It's like,
Yep.
this is you, this is me. Wow.
Right.
Yeah. No problem with that.
Okay. It occurred to me. That's how most of my actual sessions go. If something occurs, like it just sort of comes out. The person that I am today, it's kind of funny, but I'm going to go ahead and share it. So maybe a year ago, I would have looked at who I am today and said, what kind of hippy dippy foo shit is that? What in the actual, that ain't real. And I'm looking at me back then, it's kind of funny.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of funny. So when someone even sort of implies that, I'm kind of like, yeah, I know. This is, there's a reason. I don't really defend my position, but it's just like, yep, I was you once, and I would have thought I was a wingnut too.
Yeah.
But I found the truth of what I'm living in, and that's what I want to share with you.
Yeah. I think I relate to that for sure. And but mine's a little bit different, because I always knew I was going to be this person for some reason. I think around 10 years old, somewhere between 10 and 12, I knew I was going to write my book. I didn't know what it was going to look like. I just knew I was going to write my story in some way.
That's
and
awesome.
It's which still baffles me in some ways, because I was like, how could I have that perspective back then, knowing that every single day of my life I thought about killing myself? So it's such an interesting dichotomy of how, or I shouldn't say dichotomy, duality of looking at how I think and how I've thought over my life. Like you're so right about, like, I'm raw because I've never been raw before. I never allowed myself to be raw. I would be honest with people, but I would never be honest and raw with myself. And that was the downfall for me, is that I needed to be raw. And one of the things that if I want to inspire people, that's why I step out and I talk about suicide and mental health and all of these things like I do. Like that one of the scariest moments in my life, and I've been deployed to Afghanistan twice. One of the scariest moments of my life was walking into a conversation, I shouldn't say, a discussion with 50 infantrymen about mental health and suicide. It scared the shit out of me, right? To open up and talk about my own suicide, my dad's suicide, how it all happened, and where it brought me, to talk about this story with guys that I knew were hard guys, right? Hard people. I've worked with them before. These are my colleagues and my peers and my subordinates in some. So that was the scariest moment in my life. Was, this was about a year ago, opening up about that and expressing myself to that. I had been on TikTok and I had talked about it for 6 to 9 months by that point. And now I'm finally sitting there talking about this and in front of these people. And it was like a moment where I was like, I need to stop judging myself for this. That was really a moment of clarity for me, of like, why? Who gives a fuck? Like I've kind of moved into the Gary V mindset, and I just like look at things and I'm like, who gives a fuck? Like, it doesn't matter. Like if Private Smith looks at me and he's like, I don't agree with that, or Sergeant First Class, Geronimo looks at me, he's like, the fuck is wrong with you? I'm like, I'm talking to you. You're the fucking problem. You know, I have I have respect for you as a human being, but also I'm directly counteracting your negativity. So I need to be here and I need to share my story because people like you are the exact problem. And from that point on, like the hate I would get on TikTok, the hate I would get on, any social media, or even stepping into a situation and having to deal with someone that didn't agree with me. I didn't give a fuck. I don't give a fuck, right? Like I want people to disagree because then I learn why they don't disagree.
You use it.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's fuel.
Well,
is what it is.
It's not just fuel though. I need to learn because we've created this society that is so extreme, right? And
Okay.
and we can talk about like the Democrats, Republicans, conservatives, liberals. It doesn't matter. There's everything's extreme.
Mhm.
And if I can't learn from these people that are on one extreme while I'm on the other, because I'm not necessarily on the other. I'm here and I talk about things on one extreme and this extreme. But if I can't learn how to talk to these people, I'm only going to talk to these people.
Yeah.
And marketing would say, then just talk to these people because that's business.
Yes.
But that doesn't solve any fucking problems, does it?
Exactly.
So I look at it, yes, I look at it as fuel, but also I look at it as I have an opportunity here. And I have an opportunity to learn how to talk to people that I've historically not been able to talk to. And people that are the problem. Because I look at, I look at a lot of people that are empaths and people that have relationships with narcissists. Well, I can talk to empaths and fix them all day, but if I don't learn how to talk to narcissists, then they're just going to keep building problems for me, and that's not solving my problems. Like I said, I don't want to do this for the rest of my life. I would love it if my job dried up because we didn't have any narcissists. We just had good people. So that's kind of how I look at it, and it's different.
Yeah, definitely.
But
I like it.
Yeah, I don't have judgment of myself anymore. Even today I'm like reading my book and I'm like, I don't like my book, but I'm like, I don't care.
Mm-hmm. I haven't even read it, and I know it's going to inspire people. If it's your story, like the whole story, like details that you might not remember in an ordinary conversation, but because you took the time and put that thing together as a project, you included those subtle nuances and shit. Yes, that's going to inspire people. That's going to make a change in somebody's life. If nothing else, it's going to make them take a second look, and maybe that's enough.
Yep.
What I'm discovering is people have to be committed to change.
Oh yeah.
And they have to, on some level, understand first, and then accept that it's going to be difficult at times. And if I'm the one helping you do it, I'm going to make it as painless as possible.
Right.
I feel like that's kind of my job, and I'm kind of good at it. But at the end of the day, it's like you said, if I create dependency on me, if I let you lean on me, eventually we'll both fall over, I believe is what you said, and I loved it.
Yep. It's
so true. And I'm not sure where I was going with that. So I'm just going to leave it there.
No, I mean, that's reality. I love to live in reality, and the only reason I look at my book and I say I don't like it is because I wish I would have put more in, but that's the perfectionist in me, because I'll always want to do more. That's my nature of I want to do more, and that's a habit built up from, realistically my dad, what my dad, that choice made me always want to do more. And there's times where I look at my book and I'm like, you could have done better. And I also look at myself and I say, you're right. That's why I'm writing another one. And it's that continual conversation of, yes, there's going to be self-judgment there, but I also have a counterpoint. I always build a counterpoint. And it's it's a conversation, right? You can't live without self-judgment. You know, it's just not real, because we live in a society that's built to create self-judgment.
Mhm.
That's what advertising really does. Like, you need this. Like, oh, I do, but I can't afford it. Why the fuck can't you afford it? You know, it's like this, it's meant to be there in a sense. And escaping that is almost impossible at this point. So there's always going to be some self-judgment. So you have to create the counterpoint to it. You have to create a voice within yourself that's powerful enough to say no. And that's what I do, right? Like, I balance things. I don't want people to heal to find happiness. I think it's bullshit. I want people to find peace, and I want people to find balance, because those are achievable. I think you can be at peace with yourself and still lose things. I think you can be balanced with yourself and still be angry, still be upset, still be sad, but also still be happy, right? Two
Yeah.
things can be true at the same time. Is like, I lost, two very important things to me in the past couple months. Like, I lost a soldier that I deployed with, and I also lost a baby to miscarriage. And both of those were fucking hard. But I also balanced that out with knowing who I am and how important who I am really is. Not just for my family, but for me, right? Like, I I gave everything I could in both of those situations, and it didn't work. I'm not meant to understand all of it. I wish I could. I really do. I wish I could answer the question why, but I've tried to answer the question why with people, my dad, right, for years. And I never will get a perfect answer. And I think what really has allowed me to build that understanding of self-judgment is knowing I can't answer the questions. I don't have the answers. I never will. I'm a human being. And all I can do is know me and know what I provide, know what I offer, know what I have, potential for, and own that. And that's kind of what allows me to balance things out, is creating this ability to feel, but this ability to know, and leveraging both at the same time. Is I got to feel what I got to feel. Losing those things was hard. I feel that. I still feel it. And I also know, I know who the fuck I am, and I know where I'm going. I've got to do that. So that's kind of where I'm at.
I like it. And the part running underneath it all is that until you basically, I don't know what else to call it, but come out, right? Like, until you started doing the work.
Yep.
And this is how I view myself, and I think it's why I resonate with you at this point, is I was so just contracted.
Yep.
That I couldn't move. But then I started to unwind and I started to unfurl, and before I knew it, I was moving faster forward than life was. It's almost like I was trying to make up for lost time. And so it doesn't matter how many books you write, I don't think, Dylan. It's as soon as it's ready for publication, you're going to sit down and read it and say, I could have done better. And the reason I believe is because you're constantly growing. It's this unfolding that's happening.
Yeah.
At least that's what's happening for me. And, the more you look, the more you see.
Yep.
And hindsight's always 20/20. So is there that moment of course. But here's what I've learned about people, and it doesn't matter who they are, no matter how heinous they are. They're always doing their best, even when they're at their worst, given what looks real to them in the moment. There's not a single person on the face of the planet that has not done something, and whether it's 10 seconds or 10 years later said, what the fuck was I thinking? Well, you're believing your thought in the moment, and you didn't have anything better to go by. You're always going to be able to look back and say, I had options A, B, C, D, double P, Q, and Z, but you couldn't see them then. So beating yourself up about it now doesn't accomplish a whole hell of a lot. It's taking away from your ability to create something right now.
Yeah.
Sorry, I got a little long-winded there.
No, it's good. It's good. I haven't even touched any of the questions that I have.
Sorry.
How do you feel? How much longer do you want to go?
My time is yours. Or versa versa. I mean, I don't this may end up being like your longest episode ever. I don't know.
I'd like to let's wrap it up in the next 15 minutes or so.
Okay.
So
I'm down.
let me see if I have a question. Good question. Well, here's a good one. What do you think are the biggest obstacles that people face right now for mental health?
People believe they're thinking, and I'm a person too. So it's not like I'm saying, you out there, stop believing you're thinking, because we all do it. But I don't know that there's a lot of people out there that know that they have an option. Like if there's, it goes back to what I said before. If there's a thought in my head, I know that I don't have to adopt it, take it home, raise it, educate it. I know that, but I don't know how many people know that. So believing, this is getting a little deep, but believing what looks real and assuming that's the only option. I think that might be one of the biggest things standing in the way of people's peace.
Certainly. Yeah, it makes sense. So what, because I often see kind of two different perspectives in this kind of situation.
Mhm.
I see people that trust like that they'll do something bad. And then I also see people that cannot trust themselves. How do you address, with kind of thinking about the obstacles and looking at it your way? How do you look at that and how do you address that?
I guess by allowing people or creating a space for people to explore the possibility that the consequences aren't nearly as bad as they believe that they might be. We have a habit of living in the past and the future, and instead of the present moment, obviously, like living right now, it's hard because we're culturally conditioned not to. But we're using the past to create the future, and we're trying to avoid the mistakes that we made in the past. And so if it looks similar and we can remember something really bad that happened, it's not too difficult for us to envision a seriously, like, just terrible consequence if we even risk this. But the truth is, there's no law that says the past will repeat itself unless we believe that it will. It's a hell of a lot more. I mean, if you're looking for evidence, you're going to find it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it doesn't matter. It makes more sense to me to look for evidence of possibility than it does for certain negativity.
That's really powerful. When you really come down to that concept, I hope people really take from that when you listen to this, because when you look for something, you will always find it, especially nowadays. Like Google. Like I've Googled like 3 things in just this session. Like I'm gonna fucking find it because Google will help me find it. And you can even content has now become search engines, right? Social media have become search engines. Like you can find anything you want, any argument. I will find you both supporting and counter arguments to all of it, and they're always going to exist. And you can sit there and place yourself on one side, and there's always going to be an argument to you. So stop placing yourself and start finding the possibilities for the solutions rather than the problems, because the problem is always going to exist. Your problems will always exist. You will always have problems. You're a human being. Like the fucking heat is a problem. Like summer sucks sometimes, and so does winter. Like we're in Wisconsin. Like this state sucks most of the time. Like 8 to 9 months of winter is pretty rough sometimes. So knowing that, I mean, that's so profound that you say that, is that look for the possibilities, look for the potential. I think that's probably why you and me get along so well, is we both just see it, right? There's no other option for us. Like I don't see your detriments. I don't see your weaknesses. I look at people and you look at people, Loison, and you just, here's all your strengths. And they're like, what? no way. And you're like, yeah, let me explain. And it's fucking easy for us.
Yep.
And you just share and you just show these people. And it's like, for the first time, they get to step outside of their own perspective and see the possibilities literally laid out in front of them. And that's, I already know that's what you do, you know, like you've done it here in front of me. And that's just something that is very rare for people to really focus on. I love that you brought it up.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And it's a natural thing for me. I don't know if that's a gift. I don't know if that's a talent. I don't know if that's a skill. Probably a combination of all three. I mean, if it's kind of like you being constantly dissatisfied with the books that you're going to write for the rest of your life. I'm constantly growing. You're constantly growing. So I think maybe it's a combination of all three, but it's scary to be here sometimes. Like it's not normal. I think it's natural, but not normal. That's an important distinction to make. But I don't think it's normal for you and I to talk about the things that we talk about out loud. If it were normal, more people would be doing it.
Yeah.
And you're right, we wouldn't have a job. We would be doing something else. I don't know what we'd be doing. I can't envision doing anything other than what I'm doing now, but you're right. We wouldn't have a job if we were normal.
Right. Yeah. If all the stuff that I talked about was okay and normal to talk about, people wouldn't be called crazy. People wouldn't be called, ridiculous or unnatural or whatever. Like this is stuff that throughout my military career was called, being a pussy or being a bitch or, that kind of thing, or weak, and it's, when I look at it now, all of that is immature, right? Like
it's far more than that. It's a lie.
Yeah.
Vulnerability is the pinnacle of strength. I don't know how many people I've told that to.
Absolutely.
And some of them are vets and they look at me like, vulnerability is some kind of STD that you could catch. No, it's not. It's a place. It's a powerful place. It doesn't feel like it.
Yeah.
But if you go there, you help other people go there.
Yep.
If you're willing to stand in your own humanness and be okay with it, that's powerful.
Yeah. And here's the difference between our niches, right? Veterans know they are warriors. Women don't know that they're warriors. And the vulnerability is different on each side. That's something, I didn't really realize until now, is that I talk to so many women that are like just hammers, absolute like bulldozers of incredibly powerful, like, and strong. Like it's crazy. And I look at them and I'm like, you're a fucking warrior. You know that? And they're like, no. And then I talk to veterans and like, you guys are fucking warriors. And like, yeah, that's what we fucking do. But you suck at vulnerability. If you want to be a warrior, like you have to be able to be vulnerable because you have to know what you're defending.
Yep.
There's a difference between being a soldier and being a warrior.
Yes.
And being a warrior is intrinsically centered around understanding who you are.
Yes.
Because you have to go places and do things that nobody wants to do. You have to be able to go there. And if you can't, you lose. You begin to lose people. You begin to lose friends. You begin to lose family, right? If you can't overcome yourself, then what kind of warrior are you really being?
Hell yeah.
And if you can't be the warrior, if you can't step up and fight when you need to fight, what kind of human are you really being? You can't live in this extreme of being fully vulnerable, and you can't live at this extreme of being fully violent. Like, I think there's a very important balance that you have to maintain within that. You have to be able to be violent, and you have to be able to be vulnerable. or else you'll be taken advantage of in whatever ways, whether it's by yourself or by others.
Yeah. When I am working with veterans, one of the places that I do the best I can to take them, and I've been pretty successful so far, is you're more. If, I mean, somebody's like me, it's been in for, a long time out now, but somebody that's all they are. That's
Yeah.
the only thing they are. That's the essence of who they are. And that's not even an original idea.
Yeah.
Our idea of what a veteran should be and the standards that we try to live up to as a result of that, those are generational ideas. Those have nothing to do with us. So if you're going to wear veteran like a skin, you're never going to reach your full potential. If you wear veteran like a shirt that you can unbutton, take off, brush off, and put on a hanger and put it back on when you need it, you're going to thrive.
Facts.
But until you see that, you'll never be able to be as powerful as I can see you.
Yeah.
I can see you. You will never be able to see yourself this way because you're more than your service. You're more than your war. It's time to come home.
Mhm. And that applies to us too, as coaches and as veterans. If you're an accountant, right? Like a mother, a father, like it applies to everything.
Yes.
If you wear everything like it's a skin and you don't understand how to take it off, you're gonna tear yourself apart when you can't be that person anymore.
Yep.
You have to be flexible and you have to be able to step outside of your box. I mean, that's a great analogy. So let's wrap this up, and I like to wrap it up with a single question. You answer it however you want to, and I probably should have prepared you for it, but you're on the spot now. If there was a message you could leave the world, what would it be?
Come home. This applies to veterans. It applies to people that aren't veterans. We literally just talked about it. Come home. You are not going to find what you're looking for outside of yourself. Home isn't a place with a roof and four walls. Home is what you're going to spend the rest of your life looking for until you realize that you've carried it with you your whole life. Come home.
Beautifully put. Very beautifully put. I love it. Well, Loison, thank you for joining me. I appreciate it. This has been an awesome episode. Yeah, we'll have to do this again soon for sure.
It was a privilege.
Yeah, thank you.
It really was.
Well, you can find Loison's website, his Facebook group down in the description below. And I just want to thank all of you for joining me on this week's episode. It's been awesome. And guys, we'll see you next time on the Dylan Experience.